Use your illusion. We are hypnotized on a daily basis by media, our family, our friends, and at work, for good and bad. We are hypnotizing others. Allowing ourselves to be placed under a persuasion spell is a choice. Avoiding illusory trap doors is easier when you know the craft. So, this is what we were just talking about, being hypnotized every day by media, by yourself, by others. People act in a way, they advocate in a way, they message in a way to get other people to do the things that they want. We all do this. We want to promote good behavior and punish bad behavior. This is called meritocracy. So, we are hypnotized on a daily basis by media, our family, our friends, and at work. So, some people talk about positive punishment, and there's positive affirmation, negative affirmation, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. And ideally, I think most of us would like it if life were as stimulating, but also as streamlined as possible for the most part. We'd like things to go in a way that, yeah, we have enough friction so that we're challenged, we're not bored, but at the same time, we would likely prefer, in general, most people would prefer, that bad things don't happen to them. And of course, with the looming threat, the inevitable death at the end of the road, it's just a matter of time before something bad happens. Of course, I'm not sure if by the time I'm an old man, I'll be ready for death. Kind of morbid to think about it that way, but so we're hypnotized to act in a specific way. And in many ways, these forms of hypnosis and persuasion come as ideologies, code, for example. And in some cases, I do call it modern religion, social justice, censorship, institutions, global warming, moral panic, outrage culture, celebrity, and more. People are hypnotized and brought into certain boxes and certain ways of thinking, and outside that box, outside that narrow Overton window of acceptable thought and dialogue, is extreme. Of course, it's considered extreme by those that would proselytize you to get in that box in the first place. And of course, they usually pair it with real world moralism and moral virtue and universal truth. And they might say things like equity and equality and equal, and everybody, we might be saving the world. With a modern religion, of course, you always have to have some sort of evil or doom device. You have to have doomsayers, but you have to have an apocalypse in every religion. So with the modern religion of global warming, of course, that's climate catastrophe. And when I hear about that, because I'm agnostic to most of these modern religions, including global warming, I say, okay, doomer, and leave it at that. But of course, definitely seek subject matter experts and find your truth when it comes to these topics. I am still learning every day. So it's not necessarily good or bad that we're being hypnotized. It's actually just a simple fact. It's a fact. What I'm saying right now is reinforcing my confirmation bias. I'm passing the same information through my neural pathways again and again. And because all of this makes sense to me, there's no cognitive dissonance muscles to bounce things off. If I say the wrong thing, if I say the opposite of the truth, in my estimation, I will, of course, start to bounce it off and try to course correct, as it were, find a new pathway to move forward. So we are hypnotizing others. We are always trying to create the world we want to see, whether we know it or not. A lot of this becomes automatic and subliminal over time. We just use our pattern recognition to find things that we like and that we don't like, things that are generally in the neutral space, and we try to, reward good behavior, punish bad behavior. We try to not repeat mistakes. If we had a negative experience doing something, That kind of informs our expectations when we go into the future and try to do the same thing again. We know what to expect, we know what to avoid. So we are kind of convincing ourselves of what reality is. And sometimes without enough information, you have limited information. Well, I always say the past does not dictate the future. So just because something, looks similar, you can make an analogy if you'd like. 20 years ago this happened, and now because 20 years ago it happened, it'll happen again. Does that make sense? For some things, it is determined. Physics determines certain things. I apply casual fatalism, but in some cases you just know what is inevitable. For example, we know the sun is in the sky, it's going to be there tomorrow. The moon's there, they're going to be there. Unless there's a catastrophe, unless there's a major change, a sea change in our universe, in our galaxy, in our solar system. But these things are constant. And so once we use our pattern recognition, we apply a little casual fatalism, some things can be moved and others appear to not be movable, and we navigate around them. Of course, we are building a program. We are programming ourselves to navigate reality in a specific way. And usually it's to our benefit, because we are survivalistic organisms and we like to be happy for the most part. Unless we have pathology that suggests otherwise on an individual and subjective basis. So I continue here. Allowing ourselves to be placed under a persuasion spell is a choice. So persuasion is a science. I listen to Robert Gialdini and Scott Adams and Mike Cernovich, Ali Alexander, and a few other people on the subject, the art and science of persuasion. Of course, some people might refer to it as, it is a linguistic science. You have things like negotiation and publicity. They're all part of this system. It's kind of an economy of words and of behaviors. So persuasion spell, of course, if someone is very persuasive, if they're negotiating correctly, if they have, good skills at, making arrangements and deals and convincing other people to act or do certain things or to say certain things, to influence. The art of influence is about persuasion. These are all under the same header, okay? Now, persuasion, of course, is a form of hypnosis. It's a form of hypnosis, persuasion. So, understanding the mechanisms of persuasion can certainly help people recognize when they are being, when marketing speak is drawing them in, and when people, for example, political pundits, are advocating in a specific direction and framing things. Persuasion is largely about framing things correctly so that, reality is interpreted based on the frame. It gets into your head, goes through your confirmation and becomes how you observe different situations. You look at them in different frames. And I say change the frame, change the game. But it's a choice. It's not deterministic. Persuasion can persuade, or it can, you can reject persuasion, of course. There's no persuasion I can think of that's good enough to always be accepted. But being aware that you're being hypnotized all the time, being aware of how persuasion works, the mechanisms, the science, and the art of how these things work, is probably to our benefit, because with more information we can make better choices and we can choose how we'd like to proceed and not just focus on how we've been, there's different words you can use: brainwashed, hypnotized, persuaded, however you'd like to frame things for yourself. It is a choice. So avoiding illusory trapdoors is easier when you know the craft. So this is basically just a pitch for studying a little bit of persuasion, learning a little bit of economics, marketing, studying linguistics. I recommend this to most people that want to understand their world better. But if you're working in a philosophical realm, a political realm, talking about psychology and these things like that, if you're becoming a pundit online and you want to talk about these things, I would recommend Persuasion as a general. In fact, I do believe it should be taught in schools. If you're going to vocational school, especially, but I think even, it would be great if K through 12 had, more economics. Bring back home ec, and have persuasion, have negotiation so that people can get better at negotiating for raises and negotiating for jobs and building equitable contracts and learning how to stand their ground and know what deals are good and bad, know which ones to reject and which ones to push forward. I think these skills, this building a skill stack that has persuasion in it, is key to success if you want to be very successful in the larger world. If you know what to expect, if you know what to look for, if you know the mechanics of hypnosis and persuasion, you start to see them. You start to recognize the patterns. For example, I'm not a persuasion expert. Seek subject matter experts and leave me a comment below with some that you'd like to recommend to me and to others. Please do. But I study it enough I can look at an article that I know was written by a marketing expert, and you can kind of see some of what they did there. Oh, here they're pacing and they're doing a little bit of here. They're making you think past the sale, okay, and they're framing things in such a way that it makes you feel like you're compelled, that you might be at a loss if you don't buy into their product or service or mentality. So you want to use your illusion. You don't want to be taken in. You don't want to be part of the mindless mob that just does things based on emotion. You want to have a reason. You want to be able to rationalize your decision-making process in a way. We don't really have necessarily, I believe, in irrational free will, but there's also rational free will, the way of the universe. And the truth is that we make a lot of decisions emotionally. We make them before we know we've made them. Our brain makes them for us, and then we go ahead with our frontal lobes, or however it is. A brain scientist can certainly help educate me on this. But we go ahead and we rationalize what the lizard and the mammalian brain have decided for us. We already kind of know our decisions ahead of time on a subconscious level. That's why all these things that happen that are subliminal and subconscious, all these little effects, it's important to just study persuasion and get up to speed on some of the things that are trying to manipulate you and I as we get through our daily process.